Welcome to Theories About Things, where I pitch my theories about why some things are the way they are. Today, we'll get into my theory on why no one watches the NBA anymore. Okay, fine. Some of you might still watch it, but the numbers show that viewership might be quickly dwindling down to just you. So let's jump into why that is. Let's start with the situation itself. NBA ratings have been in freefall for some time. There is no shortage of coverage on this issue for the NBA. Just do a news search on NBA ratings right after you watch this video, and you'll be met with an avalanche of sports media thoroughly documenting the decline of the NBA. You'll get all of the most recent numbers on how much of a decline NBA viewership has suffered compared to the same period in the past. To add insult to injury, this past Christmas Day, December 25th, 2024, NFL ratings trounced NBA ratings. The NBA had its best Christmas Day in 5 years with an average viewership of around 5 million people tuning in. However, that's only about a fifth of what the NFL was able to generate with an average of 24 million viewers. Christmas Day was once understood to be the NBA's day in terms of viewership, but even that has fallen by the wayside. The NBA showing signs of struggling with engagement actually isn't even a super recent development. The NBA has changed some part of its All-Star Game format several times since 2018, with yet another change coming for the 2025 All-Star Game, presumably to reignite interest in the struggling event and to get people to actually watch it, or at very least, even care about it in general. This all raises the question, why is the NBA struggling for viewership this badly? Some say it's the non-stop three-point shooting, or the politics, or the players being divas that collect fat paychecks but don't deliver the corresponding effort. I think all of this is undoubtedly true and certainly factors in, but as you might expect, I have a different theory. My theory zooms the scope out a little more broadly, and while it encapsulates some of these more recent explanations, it also sheds light on what I find to be some more deeply rooted problems that confront the NBA. My theory is that two specific sources incentivize players to act in a way that NBA fans hate, and this in turn transforms the NBA into a product that fans hate, and to be expected, many fans have decided to just turn it off. The first source that incentivizes players to act in a way that fans hate is sports media. Media in general, not just sports media, having an effect on how something operates isn't exactly a groundbreaking phenomenon. At least, it shouldn't be. However, for good measure, a member of the NBA and a member of sports media got into a little bit of what the kids would call a beef over this very subject, and to me, it was a clear acknowledgement that sports media does have an effect on the NBA product. Los Angeles Lakers head coach J.J. Redick blamed declining NBA viewership partly on certain members of the media routinely criticizing the league. Former NBA player, now sports media analyst Charles Barkley took issue with this accusation, and from there, a fresh beef was formed. However, I think the sports media effect goes beyond criticizing. The way I think sports media has had the biggest effect on specifically the NBA is by emphasizing a standard that only championships matter when judging players. When you listen to any podcast or read any article or tune into any debate about an NBA player, the tally of how many championships he has is going to come up faster than you can blink. Shaquille O'Neal, another former NBA player, now co-analyst on the same show with Charles Barkley, routinely slings lighthearted insults Barkley's way about Barkley not having any championship rings, while Shaq himself has 4. This media influence has naturally spilled onto the general public. I would go as far as to say it's nearly impossible to go into the comment section of a social media post debating who's better between two NBA players and find a comment that doesn't mention a championship count. Don't get me wrong, championships are important. Players obviously play to win, but as you'll see later in this video, not everything about winning a championship is under the player's control. Not to mention, there are other ways to judge how good a player is. More than for any other sport, NBA players are judged only by whether they win championships or not, and I think sports media has plenty to do with that. In the NFL, only some players are judged that way. I would say quarterbacks in particular are judged based on how many championships they've won, but for other positions, performance and statistics matter more. Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, and Terrell Owens are widely considered the three greatest wide receivers in NFL history. Only one of them, Jerry Rice, has ever won a championship. It would be unthinkable to see any historical ranking for any position in the NBA, and two of the top three players don't have any rings. More than in any other league, championships inflate or deflate a player's legacy in the NBA. For example, no doubt an NBA great, but Tony Parker could be viewed as an example of this. He's a four-time NBA champion with the great San Antonio Spurs teams from the early 2000s. However, if we're really doing an honest assessment, if you took him off of those Spurs teams and put him on any of the worst teams in the league with him as the number one option, or if you swapped him with some of his peers at the time that to this day are still ringless like Steve Nash or Chris Paul, would those teams be better with Tony Parker than with his peers? And would Tony Parker be performing better than his peers based on his talent? I think it's something to think about, but that's not how NBA players are judged. Many people have Tony Parker right on the same level as some of the top players at his position from his time, and some even have Parker ranked above them because he has rings and the others don't. On the flip side, really talented players are valued worse than their talent would suggest if they end their careers without a championship. If players are judged only by championships, it should be no surprise that they'll only make decisions that make winning a championship easier. That's the situation that has NBA players and NBA viewers at conflict. One of the complaints that many fans have is that NBA superstars team up and form super teams, and that ruins the league because it kills the competition. Well, if those players are only judged by championships, that's a pretty straightforward way to get one. Why wouldn't they do it? When the media and the fans debate their legacies decades from now, no one will care about the context, or the teammates, or the injuries, or the landscape of the league. The only standard will be, how many rings does he have? When superstars team up, not only do they create the best possible team to win a championship, but they also remove the competition they have to compete against on the way there. Remember, when LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade teamed up on the Miami Heat, they not only formed a super team, they also removed each other as competition. They were all previously on playoff teams in the same conference the years before, so together on the Miami Heat, they all no longer had to go through each other on the way to a championship. In every way, superstars teaming up makes the path to a championship easier. However, fans hate it because all of the suspense from the season is gone when you know the likely outcome due to all of the best players being on one team. But if the players know that they're only going to be judged by whether they win a championship or not, the incentive is there, even if it's at the expense of the fans. Another common fan complaint is that players sit out of games too often. Again, we have to go back to the incentive that comes from judging players only by championships, and how that creates a conflict with the NBA viewer. If a player is only going to be judged by the amount of championships he wins, there's a natural incentive to play as little of the regular season as possible in order to be healthy enough for the postseason. Every game comes with a small chance that a player might get a serious, season-ending injury. If nothing he does in that regular season game will add anything to his legacy, but suffering a season-ending injury in that game and not having the chance to win a championship will deflate his legacy, there's no incentive to play the second night of a back-to-back in Charlotte. There's actually an incentive for players to sit out as many games as they can get away with. The incentive becomes greater for top players as their legacies are most on the line with regards to winning championships. So now the NBA finds itself in a situation where its best players are incentivized to team up and form super teams and also sit out as much of the regular season as possible in order to be in the best position to win a championship. This is the product that the NBA now has to try to sell, so it should be no surprise that fans are just turning it off. It all goes back to sports media. They are most responsible for emphasizing the standard that only championships matter for NBA players, and the players are just responding to this incentive by doing what most easily helps them win a championship. Unfortunately, the result is an unwatchable product for many fans. To take it a step further, and I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but I will say it wouldn't surprise me at all if the NBA originally had a hand in creating this standard by which players are judged, which is that only championships matter, and then using sports media to make it a widespread sentiment. Creating a chase is a lucrative and proven concept that's widely used in the world of business, specifically in the luxury goods business. The more difficult something is to acquire, the more the customer will chase it. You can't walk into a Ferrari dealership, even with a duffel bag full of cash in each hand, and buy a new Ferrari. Ferrari makes new customers buy a used Ferrari first. Then, the customer has to have a record of regularly servicing that used car with Ferrari, which, as you might guess, isn't cheap to say the least. Then, sometime in the future, Ferrari might allow that customer to purchase a new Ferrari. Rolex works in a similar way, and so do many other luxury brands. You can apply the same concept to the NBA, but in a slightly different way. Michael Jordan is widely considered the greatest basketball player of all time, and if you think about it from a business perspective, given the concept of a chase that we just discussed, the NBA has an incentive to make sure he's always considered the greatest of all time, so that there's always a chase to surpass him. From every generation of players that comes into the NBA, there's going to be maybe one or two that might even have a chance of being mentioned in the same conversation as Michael Jordan if everything goes right. Fans from every generation are then invested in the chase to see if someone finally surpasses Jordan as the greatest of all time, and therefore, they tune in. If a new player was crowned the greatest player of all time after every generation, the title itself would lose its value, and no one would care enough to keep tuning in. So you can kind of see the incentive that the NBA has to keep Jordan recognized as the GOAT with the general public, even decades down the line when the new generation of viewers has never even seen him play. So how does the NBA accomplish this? Objectively speaking, Jordan doesn't have the most points. He doesn't have the most well-rounded skills in NBA history, and he isn't the best shooter. But what he does have is the most polished championship record of any superstar player leading a team in modern history. The perfect 6-0. So if that's the standard, no one is going to be able to easily catch that. The chase would continue. The fans would tune in every generation to see if a generational superstar can finally catch and even surpass that magic number. And in theory, the NBA would be able to ride this chase all the way to the bank. Unfortunately, it looks like that's starting to backfire. Players are certainly chasing those championships, but they're doing it by forming super teams and sitting out games, and fans are starting to get fed up. Now, let's get to the second source that's incentivizing NBA players to act in a way that fans hate, and that's the general structure of the league. The NBA is made up of 30 teams, but they aren't all equal. The league is dominated by a handful of big market teams, and furthermore, the big media markets themselves. These big market teams, the Lakers in Los Angeles, the Warriors in San Francisco, the Celtics in Boston, and a few others carry the league in terms of money generated. These few teams keep the rest of the league afloat so that there could even be a viable league. If each of these teams was a standalone business, less than half of them would survive, and fans would have to watch the same 10 mostly coastal teams play against each other all year long, and that would get old fast. These few big market teams wield the most power in the league. Not only do they make the most money, but they win the most championships, and I'll dive a little deeper into that in a minute. Just 4 big market teams have won 62% of all of the NBA championships in the history of the league. Just 4 teams. Now I know what you're probably thinking. Some of the teams in the NBA now didn't exist when many of these championships were won, so it's not a fair comparison. The league expanded to the 30 teams it has now back in 2004. Starting with the end of the 2004-2005 season through the making of this video, 20 championships were won. 9 of those championships, which is 45%, were won by just 3 of those same 4 big market teams. No matter how you slice it, it's just easier for a few big market teams to win. These few teams have the money, the infrastructure, and the culture in place to more easily compete for championships compared to the bottom 70% of the league. These teams are also able to attract top free agents far more easily than the small market teams can ever dream of. Just look at the most high-profile free agent signings of the past decade. As a free agent, LeBron James left the small market Cleveland Cavaliers to sign with the mega market Los Angeles Lakers in 2018. Kevin Durant in 2016, as a free agent, left the small market Oklahoma City Thunder to sign with the large market Golden State Warriors, and then in 2019, he left again for another big market team in the Brooklyn Nets. You'll almost never see the reverse in the NBA, where a top superstar leaves a big market team in his prime, under his own will, and signs with a small market team as a free agent. There are some clear reasons for this. We have to very bluntly start with the abundantly obvious. These are young, tall, physically fit, ultra-rich athletes. They're going to want to be young and rich in metropolitan cities where all of the clubs and the parties and the celebrities are. NBA players also make more money from endorsement deals than athletes from any other league. There is simply much more endorsement money to go around in these big market metropolitan cities. Speaking of money, income also plays a factor. The overwhelming majority of NBA contracts are fully guaranteed, meaning the player will receive the full amount of the contract regardless of whether the player ends up getting injured or released. This differs from contracts in the NFL, where they're only partially guaranteed, meaning the player is only guaranteed to receive just a fraction of the total contract and would only receive the full amount if certain conditions are met, some of which are out of the player's control. Therefore, most NFL players are inclined to consider money over all else, even if that money comes from small market teams, especially when you consider income taxes. In the NFL, if a big market team like the New York Giants offers a player a $5 million contract with $1 million guaranteed, and a small market team like the Jacksonville Jaguars offers the same contract, the player would actually be more inclined to go to Jacksonville, because if something unfortunate happens and the player's contract is reduced down to the minimum $1 million, Florida doesn't have any state income tax, so the player would be able to salvage the most out of the already reduced contract. NBA players don't have this conundrum because NBA contracts are fully guaranteed and very large, where even bench players these days make $20 million a year. The NBA player would be more inclined to head to the big market. Like I mentioned earlier, young rich athletes with big, fully guaranteed money in their pockets are going to want to be young and rich in Los Angeles, not Utah and Minnesota. All of this is to say that a small handful of powerful, big market NBA teams have a much easier time being successful compared to the rest of the league. That's the general structure of the NBA. Fans of these teams know that if these teams ever fall on hard times, it probably won't last that long. These big name teams have the money and the knowledge to get out of it, and a big name megastar will probably come to save the day as a free agent in no time. Therefore, it's not that difficult to stay engaged as an NBA fan of one of these few teams. Your team is almost always in it. However, if you're a fan of one of the other 20 teams, it's not as easy to stay engaged. For the NBA to be structured this way, with a small handful of big market teams dominating the league majority of the time, it makes the league susceptible to loss of viewership. The NBA needs to offer a very compelling and very exciting product at all times in order to keep the fans of more than half of the league's teams engaged, even as their own teams operate with a huge disadvantage compared to the big market teams. The NFL doesn't have this problem. They have a much easier time keeping all of their fan bases from all around the country engaged. The wealth of success is more evenly distributed in the NFL. The two most decorated franchises in the NFL only have 6 championships each. 2 more have 5 each, and a handful have 4 each, and so on. These championships are all also distributed quite evenly among big media market and small media market cities, as you can see. In fact, currently the most dominant juggernaut in the NFL is the Kansas City Chiefs, while the NFL teams of nearly every major metropolitan city in the country are all struggling. However, the NFL ratings are still as dominant as ever. So there you have it. That's my theory on why the NBA is struggling to hang on to its viewers. Players are incentivized from 2 main sources to make decisions that fans hate, and the fans have naturally responded by tuning the league out entirely. Sports media has popularized the standard that a player's legacy only depends on championships, so players are now incentivized to form super teams and to sit out the regular season in order to more easily chase championships, both of which make for a bad product for majority of NBA fans. Also, just by how the NBA is structured as a league, being dominated by a few big media market teams, this incentivizes the best players to only play for those few teams and cities, therefore making the rest of the league uncompelling to watch most of the time. When players have these incentives, it's a surefire recipe for losing viewers. So what can be done about this? I'm going to be honest with you, not much. The NBA is built the way it's built, and the media narratives are generations deep and are what they are as well. What the NBA has to hope for is to constantly hit the lottery in terms of a generational player that everyone will tune in to watch no matter where they are. After Michael Jordan, it was the late Kobe Bryant. After Kobe Bryant, it was LeBron James. These players transcend their teams and even the league. People from all walks of life and all areas of the globe tune in to watch this level of athlete. The NBA has to hope that it can keep generating one of these kinds of players as the previous one retires. This is the only proven model that works based on the way the NBA is designed. Something else that can be done, although I'll admit it's a little far-fetched, is to come up with some kind of statistic that measures a player's individual value added and then popularize this metric the way that counting championships was popularized. A CEO who takes a company from the brink of bankruptcy to even mildly profitable again is considered to have a much better legacy and is much more coveted than one who inherits a top company and just keeps it there. The NBA might benefit from players' legacies being judged in a similar way. If adding value in terms of wins to struggling teams means more to players' legacies than championships, it might incentivize against forming super teams, as they would have to split that value added, and it might incentivize players to not sit out as many games as they can't add value in street clothes on the bench. It might also incentivize top players to take their talents to some of the smaller market teams because their legacies would actually get a major boost from adding value to struggling teams rather than just continuing to enrich teams that were already successful before they got there. This sounds a little out there, but the league needs to get creative. The NBA clearly has a problem, and not enough people are even tuning in to see if it ever gets fixed. So what do you guys think? Was this theory a slam dunk, or did I lay some bricks? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear me discuss some more interesting topics. See you in the next one.